Welcome back, everybody. We're here for another exciting REDX interview with our top prospectors on how they generate business consistently and predictably using their systems, tools, our products, services, and, of course, taking the right mindset and putting it all into one place. And so I'm here with Zaleski from what's probably a beautiful day in Denver, Colorado, to share with you his insight into a particular lead, a lead type you may not have heard before. And we're here to explore the ins and outs of what he does, how he does it, and to learn a little bit about for rent by owner leads. And so, Zach, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to spend here with us at REDX and to share with the larger community of prospectors out there.
Yeah, sure thing. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, you know, you and I had a little bit of a chat before we got on the call, just so you knew what to expect and for us to get ready for things. And I tend to start most calls with a little bit about you and then very specifically about the performance in your business, because I think why waste anybody's time in listening to somebody who may or may not know what they're doing? I mean, there's probably no better way to really quickly and effectively look at and understand if someone's having success at what they do by asking them, what is the success you're having at what you're doing? And so if you could, first couple of questions here is, how long have you been in real estate? How long have you been prospecting? And give us a little idea about the growth you've experienced and the numbers that you're generating from either a transactions perspective or even a GCI perspective.
Sure. So I started in real estate in 2005 as an appraiser. I got my real estate license in 2009 and really made the transition to being a real estate agent full-time in end of 2010, beginning of 2011 is when that happened. In terms of consistently prospecting, I've been doing that for a bunch of different lead types for about 2.5 years now. In terms of my numbers, last year wasn't great. I had a bunch of turnover with staff and stuff like that, so I only did about 14 million in volume total for last year. The year before that, we did just over 18 million. And this year, our goal is to do 30 million. And we are, let's see, where are we so far this year? We're at about 2.7, 2.8 million, somewhere right around there, closed as of today for this year.
You know, those numbers are phenomenal by almost every single measure of sales performance when you compare it to the average real estate agent and the average prospector. And so I know you have higher standards for yourself than anybody else is going to. And so, you know, it's always interesting to hear how you kind of have a little bit of a reluctancy in sharing your numbers, yet I think many people listening to this would be like, what? Yes, please, I'll take half of that.
So, right.
What does that translate into as far as GCI when you give us a range, like last year to this year, what does that look like? Because like you said, you're doing some restructuring, you've taken a hit, and so that shouldn't necessarily be a final judgment in some people's minds on, well, it's just this. So yeah, help us understand that.
Yeah. So this year with about 30 million in volume, we're looking to do about 770,000 in GCI and have about 225,000 in net profit at the end of the year. So that's the objective for this year. Last year, I think we were only profitable about 25,000, and that was off of I want to say probably about 300,000 in GCI. And then the year before that, 2015, I guess it would be, about 370 or so in GCI. And I want to say we were about 75,000 profitable that year. So I tend to run kind of a tight ship. It's it's really me as the lead agent, and then I have an ISA who's on the phone all day, and then I have my assistant, Kristen, who's not even full-time, and then I have a contract out to a transaction manager who handles all of our buyers and sellers when they go under contract. And I got a couple guys who run signs around and do showings and things like that, and they're all on a as-needed contractual kind of basis, not full-time.
Yeah.
So
there are variable costs, not a fixed cost, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Great.
So, and last year I had tried, I had a buyer's agent and I hired a listing specialist, and that kind of blew up and slowed things down a little bit. So I'm doing a lot of work right now, but hopefully not for too much longer.
Yeah, hopefully you find the right people, because that's one thing I've seen across most companies, whether it's small or large. You got to get the right people. That's just the people equation is always the most difficult for companies. And so, thanks for taking us through the numbers and the structure and kind of the future of what you're doing. And so, like I said, you scored extremely high on our survey/assessment process, and we saw that especially you had a unique characteristic of why a lot of people are listening today to this, which is the for rent by owner leads, which are a special class of leads that we're going to spend some time talking about, the majority of our time today talking about. And before getting into that, I think it might be helpful for you to help us understand, maybe define, what is a for rent by owner lead? If you've never heard about that, what is it, and why even pay any attention to it whatsoever?
Sure. So a for rent by owner lead is an individual who owns a rental property and is trying to get it rented on their own, as opposed to going through a property management company. So a lot of times people put ads for that on Zillow or on Craigslist, just like they do if they were a for sale by owner. So that's the general idea of what they are. Why I think they're important is a lot of my past transactions have been with investors. I hooked in with an investor pretty early, and I've done a lot of repeat business with him, buying and selling, because he's a flipper. I've got another client that I connected with probably about a year and a half ago, who at one point owned 100 rental properties.
Wow.
Unfortunately, when I connected with her, she was down to about 15 or so. But I think that's one of the huge things for me about the for rent by owners is the potential to do many multiple deals with these people. So it's not just a one-off kind of transaction. You often find people that own 3, 4, 5, half a dozen properties.
That makes a whole lot of sense. It's kind of like, why build, when you have your options and choices of building a relationship and rapport with someone who you're going to do business with, compared to other lead types where the chance, like they say, what is it? I don't know if this is the exact number. Once every 7 years, someone becomes a potential client, and they buy or sell one home, or one home, sell one home and buy one home. So maybe you got two transaction sides. Sounds like it puts you in a position to have a longer term, repeat, sustainable business, and these people are always looking for solid people who know what they're doing above and beyond the average real estate agent. So I feel like the way you describe it is almost a side entrance into the investor market.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of by happenstance for me. Like I said, some of the people that I started working with just through other lead sources, my database primarily, I kind of stumbled into the investor world, but I feel like this is a great way to, really get in there cold, so to speak, if you don't have pre-existing relationships with people like that.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. I love learning new things, and that's definitely something, a perspective I clearly and previously didn't know until you shared it with us. And so Let me just probe a little bit more before we kind of jump into kind of the next sections as you and I talked about before we got started here, and I'll explain to everybody else what those are as well. Kind of our table of contents for the rest of the time we spend today is, before jumping into that. The opportunity, I just want to make sure I'm stating this correctly, and if maybe fill in anywhere else where I'm leaving it out, is for rent by owners, as you said, are an side, or as I said, and you helped me understand, a side door into the investor market. And if you're trying to get in cold, the opportunity is multiple transactions from a single person. And are there any other characteristics about this lead type that I would say attracted you to it and you've discovered is unique unto itself in comparison to all the other lead types that you've worked with?
Well, I mean, I think that's the primary difference, is that you're, connecting with people that you have the opportunity to do multiple transactions with. I think the other thing that I found, that me and my ISA have found through prospecting, is that these people aren't really being contacted the way that expired and for sale by owner leads are, which just get hammered with phone calls as soon as they're expired or for sale by owner. So the calls tend to be much more congenial, I guess is a good word. People hanging up on you all the time, and you really have. I was about to,
I guess, like the question that you just put in my mind, or the word was like kind of like if you had to describe for sale by owners, if you had to describe expireds, and you had to describe for rent by owners, each with one or two words that describe the temperament of the call.
Right.
What would you say the temperament of each one of those is?
I would say for sale by owners are combative. I would say expireds are angry, and I would say for rent by owners are surprised.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great little, I guess we can call it a bookmark or a carrot to dangle for later, because I'm going to jump into the table of contents here, the outline for the rest of our call. And one of those things, hopefully we get to, and is kind of a little mock session where you go through your script or your approach of conversation so we can actually hear that temperament in action. So we're going to get there. I just would like to give everybody else kind of an overview of what's coming up next on our call right now, on our interview. And so we spend a lot of time researching what the top prospectors, what REDX's top prospectors are doing and how they're doing it. We find similarities and we find differences, and we try to understand and explain so people can do the things that are similar, because those seem to be the grounding things that the kind of holy grail of real estate and prospecting is this thing called predictability and consistency. And these similar things that I'm about to ask you about are the things that provide that foundational those foundational systems and processes that deliver that consistency and predictability. And it's funny enough, it's just really a matter of showing up and doing something consistently and predictably every day, and that is the secret behind consistency and predictability. And so I'd like to ask you and go into what we're going to talk about are the time blocks in the routine that you have put together to support your goals and talk about your goals. And then inside of that time block, there's something that we've noticed and we call the lead stack. And every top prospector has a lead stack, whether they consciously or describe it that way or not. And it's just really the lead types, so like expireds, for sale by owners, for rent by owners, geo leads, pre-foreclosures, whatever else they have, and they order them in a particular way, and then within each one they have a kind of a priority within those. So maybe they'll call the first their freshest expireds, then they'll call their last week's expired. There's some sort of like lead stack, and they do it for a reason. They figured out that's what's worked for them and the results. And so I always like to explore the time block, which is what do you do when you get up, and what is the flow, and how does that all seem to be geared towards providing the right mental and I would say physical engagement with the moment before you get on the call. And then you jump into your lead stack, which is that, and then what happens afterwards after you book appointments. And so, yeah, basically a verbal overview and walkthrough of your calendar and the consistency that you give yourself through that, and the predictability to help get to $15 or $30 million in sales, by the way. And then once we get through that, we're going to have a pretty good understanding of what your lease stack and time block looks like. And then I really would like to dive more into the opportunity for rent buy owners, the pain or the lack of pain, like what makes these more difficult to work in certain ways, what makes them easier to work in certain ways, and the journey that you took to arrive at this is something that is perfect for your business and why it's important. And then kind of the last two steps in our conversation today, our last two parts, is going to be going into the actual call and any clever phrases or even just like we talked about before the call was there's some mundane things that if you just do them, they don't have to be exciting. They just produce results, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be fireworks. It can just be this. And then finally, any ways or any recommendations you would have for the audience out there listening to this on what to look for or how to evaluate a service or a way to procure and get for rent buy. And then that should take us through the rest of our call today.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So you want me to? I can dive in kind of with our time blocking and what our schedule looks like each day.
That would be perfect. And if I could I'll plant a seed. And like I said, I'll become a very good listener once we get the show on the road. And I think we're on the road with it right now. And so I guess one thing we like to talk about here are annual goals, which is a common trait amongst our top prospectors. They understand what they're going after. They know how to break that down into daily goals. And they have some guiding metrics that help them understand how many calls they need to make and how many contacts and or conversations they need to make. And then, that's kind of the first place that we could start. And then they structure their day. And so could you start off with that?
Yeah, I guess I would say I don't break it down to the minutia of exactly how many calls we need to make every day and every week and that kind of thing. I have it a little bit broader. I know basically we have it structured in terms of our volume. What does our volume need to be each month? And we basically have our daytime blocked from 9 to noon is when we're on lockdown and when we're in lead gen time. And we find that when we do that consistently, we generally speaking hit our goals. So I'm not maybe as in the weeds as some people are, but I am very strict about the 9 to noon time blocking schedule that we have.
That's I feel like that's a great approach. That you don't have to again be so detailed oriented. You're kind of stressing yourself out, and for some people they like having like the down to the wire number and hitting that, and others like to kind of have a more of a flexibility. And tracking volume is definitely one of those. And for those who are listening to this, I haven't pointed this out yet, but we tend to have two different types of audiences. We have people who are just getting into prospecting, and they don't really have expectations set on what success looks like or feels like. In fact, it feels really painful in general prospecting because they don't really have the skills and experience and support necessary to really understand how to keep going. And so if you could, for that audience group, like a general feel for what would you recommend, kind of like what would success look like on a daily or weekly basis, just so they know that they're getting close to staying on track. Because it's not like you make one call and then you get one appointment and you feel great and there's an instant feedback loop. It's digging through. And so could you help those out there who haven't yet made the connection between pain and profit?
Right. Yeah, I guess I would say my objective is to have a listing appointment a day. So we want to have 5 listing appointments a week, and we want to eventually convert 3 out of those 5 into a signed listing agreement that'll sell. I think I get your question, and tell me if I'm missing the mark. But I think I understand that pain there and getting on the phone and the hesitation to pick it up and start dialing. But you just have to do it, and if you do it enough and you do it consistently and you start to see results, I think that starts to take some of the pain away. When you walk away from, closing a $500,000 house and, you just got a check for, 12 or 15 grand, that goes a long way, I think, to alleviating most people's pain and even potentially makes them eager to jump back on the phone. I think some people making that kind of money on a single transaction causes them to kick back a little bit and, not maybe put in the time that they need to. But I think the mistake that a lot of people make when they adopt that kind of mindset or mentality or attitude, whatever you want to call it, is that you've got to keep that pipeline full, because you could have great success this week and make $12,000 or $15,000 on a single closing, but if you don't have anything in the pipeline, it's going to be a long time coming before that happens again. So I think it's just maintaining its consistent persistence, I think, is what it's about. Showing up every day and knowing that when you put the time in, you're going to have a full pipeline. You're going to have plenty of work and plenty of commissions coming in.
You said before, basically 9 to noon every day, you have your prospecting time blocked off, whether it's you or, like you said, you have an ISA. And for those who are not familiar with the term ISA, feel free to jump in if I don't nail this, but it's just basically an inside sales agent who does your prospecting calls for you, and they're trained to follow the scripts, and they may or may not be a licensed agent, and basically they're your inside appointment setters.
Right, exactly. Yep, that's pretty much it. And the way that we have it structured, so my ISA, his name is Kelly, he's just there pounding on the phones really all day. He works from 8 o'clock in the morning, which is when he starts calling. He actually gets in a little bit earlier than that, so he starts dialing at 8 o'clock. And then he's on the phone until 3 o'clock every day, which is kind of rare. There's not a lot of people out there that can handle being on the phone all day like that, but that's what he does. And we do have a specific format that he follows each day. But the other part of that too is when he's doing his prospecting, I'm not just, sitting around waiting for the commission checks to come in. He really has the phone handled. So what I do is I'm actually door knocking in our farm area that we are working. And my assistant, actually, she gets in, just before 8, and then she puts together a drive list for me every morning. She looks at any new FRBOs or expireds or Zillows, things like that come in new for the morning. And then I'm actually out there door knocking for my prospecting time from 9 to noon.
Wow.
And he's here in the office on the phones.
Boy, you just opened this conversation up to a whole new level.
Yeah, it's we do things at pretty intense level, and the way that I do door knocking is, and part of the nice thing is that as soon as it expires or comes on as a FRBO, I'm there that day. It's a new lead, so he's calling them, I'm knocking on their door. And we're trying to hit them every possible way that we can to connect with them before anybody else can, because oftentimes that's a distinguishing factor, who contacts them first, especially with expires as an example. I mean, those are the first leads that he calls every day, because if you're not among the first, you're probably going to lose out. I mean, a new expired lead here in our area can expect to get usually 30 to 40 calls that first day, sometimes even more. So they're only going to set appointments with so many people. So yeah, that's just kind of I guess a brief insight into our daily schedule there.
Yeah. And I'm sure not just myself, but those listening to this were like, can we please dive into that a little bit more? And I think we can maybe another time, but I really would like to see where in the lead stats for rent by owners pop into. And so I've got a couple of leading questions that I think will help verbally visualize where that fits in there for us. And so and there's a couple of questions, of course. I've always got questions before and after because that's what I do, ask questions about your day, because I feel like a big, huge component of what happens in real estate and success comes from establishing a rhythm both in and outside the office. And so would you mind going into, I would say, like, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you may or may not have, like, some people have motivational posters in the bathroom, or they have like a mantra or affirmation, like all the little details that no one can see. It's all inside of you, but you do, and you know that it's part of your like ritual, your routine, your practice before you really get out there. And so if you could just, as you can just walk yourself through the morning as you wake up and walk through the door, you get into your car, you go to the gym, you open the door to your office, so kind of each one of those little kind of milestones or mile markers along the way. If you could take us through those and what time that happens, and then anything that you do to help support in preparation of the actual prospecting.
Sure. So, when I get up at 5:30 every morning, the first thing that I do is I go to CrossFit. I try to go every single day. Sometimes I don't, but generally speaking, I'm there every day at 6 o'clock to 7. Then I come home and have my protein shake and get showered up and ready for the day and get dressed. And really, and then I'm spending a little bit of time with my family in the morning because my kids are, getting ready for school, and my wife's kind of doing all that. So I help, making breakfast and yelling at them to brush their teeth and all that kind of stuff. So I get all that done, and the last kid is out the door with my wife just after 8 o'clock, at about 8:15 or so. By that time, I'm ready to go. I've, eaten my breakfast. I've had a, protein shake or whatever, and I'm dressed and ready to roll out the door. So my assistant.
Do you wear like jeans to work? Do you wear a suit to work? Do you how do you dress for the day? Because everyone kind of has their own theories on, and that's kind of the internal state expressed externally. So everyone has a different there's no right or wrong. It's just what is it for you?
Yeah, so I wear a suit every day. I used to wear a tie every day, but that's just not really in vogue, I guess, really in my part of the world. So I'm just wearing, suit jacket, pants, and a dress shirt is what I wear every day when I go out the door. And then, so, like I said, by about 8:15, they're gone. I'm ready to go. Usually within the next 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how many new leads there are for the day, my assistant is emailing me or texting me saying that your drive list is ready. I print it out at home. And then I roll out the door. As soon as I've got that in hand, I'm just kind of chomping at the bit at that point, waiting for that list. And then, I hop in the car, and when I'm driving around, I'm doing all different kinds of leads. Honestly, I'm just listening to the news. That's how I kind of keep up with what's going on in the world, generally speaking. And then just driving from door to door and doing that. And another thing that I'll tell you is once I'm done with my prospecting time during the morning,
I
generally
how long is your door knocking session? Does it just does it run concurrently with your ISA's calling prospecting? Like kind of just have a general block where everyone's kind of supporting prospecting, and you're physically out there doing it, and he's on the phone.
Yeah, we're running concurrently on that. He has enough to keep him, on the phones until the end of time. But at some days I don't have that many doors to knock. I might only have 5 or 6. Some days I have more like 30. So if it's a day where I don't have that many and I get back to the office before noon, then I jump into my follow-up calls that I need to do and work on that until, the middle part of the day.
So with, you're a little different than the people I've interviewed recently. Is that usually it's a solo agent who's got a lead stack, and it's them working it. But it's like you've actually got, like you said, a concurrent lead stack where it's back in the office. You said his name's Kelly, who's going through expireds. Then going to what would be next for Kelly to do, because you've helped him organize that. It's not like he just showed up one day at work and he just knew what to do. And so you kind of knew through your own experience how to structure his prospecting time. And so together now you've probably got a great understanding of why that is the way it is. And so could you tell us what it is and why it is that way?
Sure. So every day has really the same beginning part for him. When he starts dialing at 8 o'clock, the first thing that he's doing is going through new expired leads. So if it's Monday, that's like Friday through whatever popped in that day. He hits all the new expireds. After that is for sale by owners. After that are Zillow Make Me Move leads. After that are for rent by owners. And then after that are any pre-foreclosure leads. And really, unless it's January 1st and we have 300 new expired leads, he makes it through that list of new leads really in about an hour, about the first hour of his day, sometimes even less than that. And that's really the same every day, that kind of hierarchy. The reason we do expireds first is because those, like I mentioned before, seem to be the most heavily mined lead source, and you've got to be there first, usually, to get anywhere with them. And then for sale by owners after that, because again, they're a heavily mined source, and getting to them as quickly as you can is important as well. Zillows are kind of like kind of like FRBOs, so we have them next. And then the for rent by owners, we put fourth because they're not as urgent. If we get to them at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, it's not the end of the world because nobody else is calling them anyway. And then after that are the.
How many of those are there a day in your area?
A day? God, I'd have to look. I don't even know off the top of my head. I'm not sure. I can pull it up and find out real quick. But so while I'm doing that, like I said, that's how the beginning part of every day starts in terms of calling. And then we have it broken down by particular day as to what's going to follow after that. And the way that we have that done is on Mondays, he's going to go through all the previous months for sale by owners, everything that's popped in the last 30 days that's still a FRBO. And then after he goes through that first month, he goes back through the entire stack of FRBOs as far as he can. Some days he makes it through our entire backlog. And then he's also, sometimes I find for sale by owner sign leads. We pop those in, and then Zillow leads. So he's going through all of those on Monday, or as deep as he can get on those. And we like Mondays because it's a depressing day for sale by owners if they've previously been listed and they didn't get any showings or get under contract over the weekend.
Psychological advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
So how was your weekend? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe there's something we can do to help.
Yeah. Well, we got 3 properties under contract, so maybe we can do that for you next weekend. Yeah. So
great. Yeah.
Let's see. I'm just looking at for rent by owners. We had like 8 new ones today. I think that's probably maybe 3, 4, 5. Looks like a more typical day as I go back here. So there are definitely a handful every day of those for rent by owners.
So you get about 25 or 30 a week, or about 100 a month. And so just to kind of get an idea of, like you said, it's a totally different temperament with them. It's not like you have to beat the rush and have an aggressive approach, both in conversation and, I guess, in physical action towards doing the work of connecting with them. And so is it safe to say that you end up actually having better, more rapport establishing conversation as well as a higher connection rate with them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the calls on the for rent by owners typically tend to go, one of 2 ways. Usually we call and say, is that property, is 123 Main Street still available? And they say, yes, it is still available. Great. Well, my name's Zach. I'm a real estate agent at Keller Williams. I was just calling to see if you had considered selling. I wondered if the equity position was right in the property, if you might consider a sale as opposed to renting the property again. And that's kind of our opening dialogue. And sometimes the response is angry. Why did you call me? Blah, blah, blah. We all, some people are just offended, for whatever reason, and that's fine. But a lot of times people are really taken off guard and are very curious, and it does start a discussion, and then we start asking questions like, well, how many rental properties do you have? Do you want to keep having rental properties? And then people tend to start opening up like, I've got 10 of them and I love the cash flow and this is what my retirement is and I don't want to sell any, and that's totally understandable. Some people are like, man, this is just more than I thought it was going to be, or I'm getting older and I want to cash out finally. So it can go a bunch of different ways, but they do definitely seem to be much more willing to have a conversation a lot of times than, a for sale by owner or an expired who's gotten 35 calls before you've talked to them at 10 o'clock in the morning.
You really just highlighted kind of the base of the next set of questions we're moving towards right now. I do have a couple of other questions related to kind of like your day and your lead stack and kind of what that looks like. And so would you mind if we came back to filling in the details on this so we can finish up the last section that we were on?
Yeah, sure. You want me to continue going through our daily kind of lead stack there?
Yeah, I just you had left off with obviously for rent by owners as in the 4th position. That depending on how much other stuff had going on with the other leads ahead of time, it just fits inside of your 9 to noon block, and that's your ISA column.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And then I think you were going through Monday. You were doing this type, you had like kind of like each day had its own kind of theme to it, and so there was a modification. Like maybe the order of the lead type was the same, but the criteria within that lead type changed on a day by day basis. Is that a fair assessment and a way to describe that?
Well, really what it is the first chunk of calls is always the same. New expireds, followed by new FRBOs, followed by new Zillows, followed by new for rent by owners, followed by new pre-foreclosures. So that's the same every day. There's
a section of new, right?
Yeah.
And it runs through all the lead types.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then, like I mentioned on Monday, it's after that, after the new stuff is done, it's all about FRBOs and Zillows. And the same thing with Tuesday, really. Those first couple of days of the week, we're just trying to get through the entire, last month
Backlog.
of FRBOs, and then all of them, because a lot of times, if they've been on the market for a while, you can strike gold with them there. So anyway, that's Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday, again, same first part of the day, but Wednesday is where we actually hit the for rent by owners and pre-foreclosures. Pre-foreclosures are pretty minimal right now, so we just try to go through that whole lead stack. And then
But you said right now that I kind of missed that. They're kind of, what was the adjective on pre-foreclosures?
There's just not many of them right now.
Okay, gotcha. Description.
Yeah. So yeah, and then for rent by owners is the focus on Wednesday, and kind of the same psychology behind for sale by owners is that if we're hitting them hard on Wednesday, it's like they didn't get anything going on over the weekend. Maybe they have those first couple of days of the week for any applications to do, credit checks and background checks and things like that, whatever they may be doing. And then by Wednesday, it's like, man, they all are terrible, and I don't want to rent to any of these people. And then they're kind of gearing up for the next weekend.
Right. Because the weekends probably are a busy time for anybody who's renting something, because the average person's working and checking out properties in the evenings, and then probably on the weekends making the big decisions.
Yeah. Exactly.
Great insight. And then does that take you through the kind of the combinations within your lead stack? There's Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, and then Thursday and Friday are all about expireds, that last section of the day, last half of the day. Because, again, the psychology there is, my listing expired and the weekend's coming up. Maybe I should have my house for sale and I could get it sold this weekend. So they try to, get in there as they're having those kind of thoughts running around in their head.
Play into the natural conversation that's already occurring in your prospects and customers' mind.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And then I guess you guys eat lunch, right? You guys eat food.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so Kelly usually gets through that first chunk of the day and then gets a good start on the second part of the day, second part of the lead stack before noon. He's usually done with most of that actually before the middle of the day hits, and then picks it up and finishes it off the last part of the day. And me personally, like I said, I'm out there door knocking all these lead types in our farm area. And then,
is your day pretty consistent though? I mean, it sounds like Kelly's changes on the day-to-day basis, kind of based on the themes, but yours are always just you're the ground troop / new. Like if it's new, you're at the front door knocking. So you're just anything new, knock you. If it's new, you knock, and that's your primary duty every day from 9 to 12.
Yeah, and I'm pretty aggressive with door knocking, so I'm knocking news, but I'm also doing a lot of repeat. So my objective on any new lead for door knocking is I'm knocking on the door 3 days in a row for the first 3 days, and then once a week for 8 weeks after that. And that's our methodology to try to get in touch with people as soon as we can and beat the competition.
Yeah. Again, our focus is primarily and should be on for rent by owners, but you're just talking, like I said, you really took this conversation and opened it up to a lot of other stuff. And I'd hate to not answer a couple of just low-hanging fruit questions that come to mind. Is how did you come to that as the matrix, the 1x1, the 2x2, whatever it is that drives your behavior every day? And then obviously
Yeah.
there's results. I mean, you wouldn't do it if there wasn't results tied to it. So yeah, you can just
Right.
do a quick little run through of this before we move on to really the real next part of this, which is the meat and potatoes of for rent by owners.
Right. Yeah, that follow-up regime is really something that I learned from Keller Williams, which is where I've been since I've started my real estate career. It's really a sense of urgency when you have a new lead. I mean, that's something that can be snatched from you at any time. So to me, it's, you've got to react quickly. So that's why it's once a day for 3 days to try to get to them because it's fresh. And then after that, it's the mindset behind the 8x8, I call it, once a week for 8-week contact regime, is that other people will give up sooner. And it's usually on those later contact points where you can strike gold if they haven't been snapped up already.
So the number 8 just seems to be like you see success in, I guess, in the internet world, you'd like kind of a long tail keyword, Google long tail. And so you can just say yes. We don't have to get into much detail on it, but I imagine extrapolating that, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th knocks, that's where you've seen things really come up for you. Most people will knock once, kind of the same way most prospectors will only call once. If you really want to see the results, you got to call 3 times, and it almost sounds like if you really want, and you're taking it beyond just even good results to great results. And so I imagine that you've just, through your experience and time, that that number in those later stages past 5 knocks is where you probably have some stories you could share on when you did that and something interesting happened and it turned into business that has kept you hooked on that succession of number of knocks per home, per lead.
Yeah, absolutely. I have over $600,000 listing coming up as a result of something like that.
So you have a $600,000 listing because you knocked on what knock did let's turn it into commission dollars per knock on that home there. So
right. Yeah. I would say I would say it's probably going to have been the 4th or the 5th one in that particular, maybe even the 6th on that one. Let's go with 6, I would say.
So 6 knocks, $600,000. Let's say, you get the sell side, and that's what 618,000 divided by 6. So $3,000 per knock. That's a pretty good number.
Yeah, I'll knock all day long for that.
I like that. It's knock, knock, knock. 3,000. Knock, knock, knock. 6,000. Knock, knock, knock. Getting closer. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I understood and was able to articulate for the audience at home listening to this kind of like some of the things that were crossing my mind, and so they could establish the connection if they hadn't, the motivations and behind your actions and behaviors, and so they could possibly model and decide if that's something they want to do themselves and incorporate. So thanks for getting off course, so we could understand that. And so I'm gonna just jump back now into really the meat and potatoes here of for rent by owners. And you firmly established that it's the 4th lead type in your stack. You have Kelly, your ISA dialing. There are about 30-ish of them per week in your marketplace. They're a great source for potential investor opportunities, which means instead of establishing a relationship with one homeowner and selling one home every 7 years, you possibly, like you said, establishing a relationship with an investor who has hundreds of properties and could turn into a portfolio of business over time. And I've kind of illuminated you through your story to me, what the kind of the opportunity is. And so I'd like to dive a little bit more as you had started off. I said we come back. We're back at this part now, and to go into basically the story behind for rent by owners for you. Like you said, how did you find them? And what was that aha moment where you made that connection? I know you've kind of gone into it a little bit. And then what are some of the key things to understand, to know, and to do, and the results that come from those?
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start by saying that I was with a different lead provider back in the spring of last year, and I, checked out, a couple of different lead sources and decided to switch to you guys. And then I think it was kind of in that initial month or two, really, where I was getting things set up and making the transition. And one of your sales reps actually said, "What do you think about possibly adding on for sale by owners?" And it caught me off guard a little bit. I'm like, what are you even talking about?
For sale or for rent?
Or for rent. I'm sorry, I said for sale.
Yeah.
But
I think I knew what you meant, just making sure.
Yeah, because I was adding, I basically had your full line of products. And adding in the for rent by owners wasn't much more, so I figured, why not? Let's give it a shot. So I think the main thing I would say is just being open to what's out there and listening. I mean, I'm constantly looking at new ideas and what other people are doing, and just being open and willing to try different things. So that was how it started off, and then Kelly started for me, I want to say, in probably August or something like that, and then he came in and started taking over. And the rental market here is really strong, as well as the sales side market. So,
does that hurt or help for rent by owner leads?
Well, that definitely hurts because they get rented quickly and easily for the most part. But just like anything, it's numbers. How many dials are you making? How consistently are you dialing? And then following up with people. So I think it takes a little while to get that pipeline built up. But what we have started doing also, or what I started doing even right from the start, was, I already got that rented. Then I would say, well, do you have it rented for a year or 6 months or month to month? And then they tell me, and then I sort of follow up for a few months before the lease is up. And we're going to have a plethora of people to call as we get here into the next, few months, because we're kind of coming up on that 1 year mark. So we'll see how that turns out. But there's a lot of different situations. We actually, the first for rent by owner that we actually closed last month. It was $530,000 sales price, and it was a VRBO because he relocated for work, so he was just doing that and getting tired of that. Needed to clear up the debt so he could buy something where he had moved to. So it wasn't your traditional kind of landlord that maybe owns a bunch of properties and that's his business. It was more of a change in circumstance which created him to be running it, which is interesting because you do run into a lot of different kind of circumstances like that. And our second for rent by owner, we actually have under contract right now, set to close, I think, in a couple of weeks. We do have a number of others in the pipeline. So that's kind of just a brief, like, start to finish, I guess I would say, or start to current.
I'm trying to create the right question to ask you, because you were heading down the path and had to finish up that one of the other sections that we're trying to get clarity on, and maybe this represents the path that I think I was feeling you kind of taking us down, which was something along the lines of you've got a for rent by owner lead, and there's going to be a number of different I guess opportunities or signs to pay attention to in what they say, or to ask and to know. And so like you said, walk us through, kind of those trigger, those, I guess, call them prospect characteristics. Like, what makes them into a prospect? I mean, they're a lead, which is just, someone's name, someone's information. You don't really have the story on them. And so how do you how do you identify how do you transform or identify, like, what a for rent by owner prospect actually looks and sounds like?
Yeah. I think I would say it's pretty basic. It's just like every other lead type. It's really trying to understand what their motivation is and what their needs are. So with a for rent by owner, kind of one of the probing questions after you get beyond that sort of initial introduction is, do you have more rental properties? A lot of people own a single rental property out of just circumstances, and they're not really, it's not their primary thing or a business that they're running, and it's not necessarily something they're totally jazzed about to be doing. So I think asking, what are your plans? Are you planning on holding on to this property for a long time? Did you have an exit strategy when you bought this property? And really asking some more of those probing questions to assess why they even have the property in the first place. Do they even have an exit strategy? Do they even think about it beyond just picking it up and holding on to it forever? So I guess what I would say are some of the key things are like, well, I rented it because I couldn't sell it. That's a huge, obviously, kind of red flag. Why couldn't you sell it then is the next obvious question. Was the market down when you tried to sell? Was it 2 years ago and the values are much higher now? So it's, but to me, the primary question is, why are you renting the property? You get some of these people that, like I said, own a dozen properties, and that's what they do. That's their income and their livelihood. But then it starts to become a conversation of, well, what is your exit strategy for that? Are you going to pass it on do you have heirs? Do they even want to have rental properties? Or is it time to start cashing out? One of the main conversations that we have with people too around for rent by owners is capital gains. So if you haven't lived in the property for a long time, you have to have lived in a property for 2 out of the last 5 years in order to in order to avoid capital gains tax. And I'm not trying to give tax advice, but that's the rule, generally speaking. I always tell people it depends on your tax situation, but I think that's an important discussion to have with people. I have short-circuited sales that way, but it's a significant tax consequence, and the last thing you want is to sell somebody's rental property and then they get a $30,000 additional tax consequence the next calendar year and call you screaming about it. So it's important to take that into consideration, and most of them are aware of that and know that whole thing. But when you can start having that kind of conversation with people and then start talking to them about 1031 exchanges, that's where you can obviously that's potential for more revenue, because if they want to sell this underperforming rental property and leverage it into something that cash flows better, like a duplex or a 3 or 4 unit, then you've got a buy side there as well as the sell side.
I think through what you shared with me gave me even more clarity to ask this next question. I think it zeroes in on where those pearls, or golden nuggets, or how to describe it is not important. What's important is, I guess, this next question, which is like, who are the opportunities, right? So there are people who are looking to, how would you break down the categories of opportunities within the for rent by owners? And so there are the people who are, in the position of, like you said, They bought it, they wanted to sell it, they couldn't, they're renting, and now there's like and they're frustrated by having managing a property and things are falling apart, and you call them at the right time and strategically, or follow up with them strategically, and then you insert yourself into like the larger conversation. There are people who are investors, and they're starting to look to move their assets, their capital into other assets, and so you would like, what are kind of the different scenarios or personas? I'm trying to like maybe capture like the different blocks. You get what I'm getting at, like the opportunity blocks. What do those look like, and how many of them are there in general?
I would say, generally speaking, there's three. There's the people that have it more through circumstance and would rather sell it than hang on to it as a rental. There are the next category are your die-hard sort of active investors who, if they did sell it, would be looking to 1031 into something else that is a better cash flow situation. And then you have the investors that are more toward the end, where they're looking to liquidate and cash out, but have a hard time kind of stomaching the fact that they're going to have to pay capital gains. Is usually the conversation there. But I would say it's those three categories tend to be the majority of the conversations that you'll have.
I think that you set up the call to perfectly transition to the next section, because the word I think you used, or you did use, is conversations. And so in the preparation before you get ready to, whereas Kelly gets ready to get on these calls, he's made you've helped set him up for success, and he's having conversations. I'm sure you hear about them and you're a part of them. And so could you give us a little role play of like what each one of those sounds like, and how you manage objections, or you further the conversation with those three different types? And so those who are listening at home can get a feel for, not only have you now identified and illuminated these three different types of people, but now giving us an example of kind of what to say, how to say it, and then what to do in those circumstances when things are going to go in the right direction or not.
Right. Yeah, so I guess with the first category, it's if you're getting into that conversation and it's like, well, we owned it or we own it and we tried to sell it but couldn't get what we want. My question tends to be, or Kelly's is, how much were you looking to get? Is there a certain amount that you wanted to net, or a certain sales price that you wanted on the property? And if so, why is that significant to you? What does that mean? What will that help you accomplish? And then, really just kind of digging into that more. And then ultimately kind of the conclusion of the conversation with them is typically, well, let's go ahead and meet over there at the property. If you are thinking about selling, I'd love a chance to stop by and take a look at it and give you my thoughts on what you could get for the property in today's market. And then, the whole objective with all of them, as with every lead, is to get a face-to-face appointment and check the property out for me. So that's how those usually go if they're successful. If they're not, those ones are typically, they got it rented already, or they have a bunch of people coming to look at it, or they're just decided that they want to rent it now because everything's been going great. So kind of the way that we go around with when the conversation turns that way is, if they say, well, I've got a bunch of people coming this weekend to look at it and I think I'm going to get it rented. Well, that's great. I hope you do. I hope that works out for you. Would it be okay if I follow up with you next week to see how things go after the weekend? And it's that persistence, polite, persistent,
I like that.
consistently that'll get you there. And then, reminding them, hey, we talked last week. How'd it go this weekend? Oh, I didn't get anybody that I liked. Well, would it be a good time to meet this week? I can come tell you what we could get for in a sale, kind of thing. if people want to continue renting it, it's kind of the other way that it goes sometimes. I
How
like
do
to
you
bring up,
know,
sure.
like the way you have like your 8 knocks for new lead, I guess, doesn't matter really what it's for sale by owner or expired. How do you know how many times to call back for rent by owner after they're struggling to try to get it rented? Like, how do you determine how many callbacks? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's not like a set number, but there is, great. But how do you like evaluate like your follow-up on those? I'm renting it, and then you're waiting for them just to kind of get disgruntled and discouraged.
Well, I like to get a kind of a timeline from them. They say, I'm going to give it another month, and if I can't get it rented in another month, I'll think about selling it then. What we do with that is we always chop it in half, whatever they say. If it's a month, we're going to call them in 2 weeks, because inevitably people make decisions sooner than what they're selling on. So that's our follow-up regime, just cut in half whatever they say. Sort of follow up for that time.
I love this simplicity.
Yeah, when we do follow up, let's say it is 2 weeks later, and I call them and nobody answers, and I leave a message. Well, what we do at that point is we initiate our 3x3. So once a day for 3 days. If we don't hear from them, then once a week for 8 weeks after that. So we implement that 3x3 and 8x8. Kind of we restart that every time there's, we need to start following up with again, getting in contact with them. And what we like to do too is vary those contacts. So on that 3x3, we'll call today, we'll text tomorrow, we'll call again the third day, we'll text. We alternate between calls and text.
My question to you is, and that was I was not going to guess that your alternation was going to be on the medium selection. Rather, I thought it was going to be on the day. So I'm glad that my mind was, given something new to process better. But how do you keep track? Like, very super tactical here is so you've got your own approaches, strategies, tactics that you've seen work, and it's usually some sort of matrix of something by something. And so how do you keep track of that? How do you know, like, for instance, how do you manage the campaign, or how do you manage or know what to do when? And so you have a for rent by owner, you call them, you speak to them, and then they tell you a month. Like, how do you take that information? How do you put it into somewhere where you know what to do next, and then keep track of what those next subsequent actions are? How do you keep track of that on a per lead basis without being distracted or things getting lost?
Yeah. Well, we're just very detail orientated, so we don't, get off the call or close the profile until we've dispositioned it correctly, and we keep very detailed notes. Like, Kelly will see my notes like, door knock 2 of 3 today, and then tomorrow door knock 3 of 3, and I'll see his, LM 1 of 3, and then the next day LM 2 of 3, or whatever it is. So we keep very detailed notes, and then we're always setting a next task. That's really important. We don't close out a file or close out a profile until there's another task set, or unless it is truly a dead lead that we're not going to be contacting again.
That'd be interesting to ask next. So where are you dispositioning them? Is it in like Excel, or are you doing it inside of some sort of CRM? Where's this data, all these notes and dispositioning happening?
Well, we have a dialer. I don't know if you want me to, if I'm supposed to say what dialer, but
please. We want people to use dialers. Whether it's our dialer or someone's dialer, we want our customers to use dialers because it makes the business better, it makes their experience of our products better, and it makes them more successful.
So we get all of our leads from you guys, from REDX, and then we feed them all into Mojo, which has a 4-line dialing system, and Kelly uses 4-line dialing every day, all the time. And that's Mojo is where we're, setting new tasks and setting follow-up calls and setting appointments. And we all have access to that, and Krista, my assistant, uses that to set up door knocks, and she does some snail mail campaigns, and I can see what Kelly's got, he can see what I've got, and all that kind of thing. So it's all very organized and on a per profile basis.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's fine. We we want our customers to have the information they need to make the right decisions for them, and there are instances where we're the best and they choose us, and there are instances where based on where they are and what their needs, there's some other solution that's better for them. And so our success comes from making sure that we give the right people the right things and not just sell them stuff.
Sure.
So that's great to know. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's an important aspect of it is, we can give everyone these tactics and these strategies, and, operationalizing them is a little bit more difficult because, okay, great, I got the idea. Now what? So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So yeah, you were also just you talked about dead leads. I think that might be just a kind of a good thing is when to quit. Like when do you quit working? And so of the one of three, we'll call them FRBO prospect types.
Right.
You've got the person who's renting and doing a great job, or feels like they're enthusiastic owner/renter. We'll give them that title. And you're waiting for the market to wear them down. You've got your 3x3, and you're implementing it. You've got that time they tell you to cut it in half. And so, at what point in time is it time to say this is not worth putting any more energy into? Like, how do you determine that for this lead type?
Yeah. Well, obviously,
for this FRBO prospect type.
Yeah, for that lead type. Obviously, if they tell us they got it rented, it's time to quit. But then we want to see when the lease goes through so that we can follow up with them a few months prior to the end of the next lease. So that's at one point.
So that could be a really horrible process for them, is they might have just a terrible tenant, something in their life could change, financially, personally, however life changes things. And so that is unexpected. Did you hear that? Okay, well, sounds like someone's having a party down the way. I did not know we had such loud speakers here. But yeah, life can change for people, and then so you're just making sure that you got something that last bit of information so you can follow up and see if an opportunity has presented itself.
Yeah. Okay. Other than that, if people tell us to stop calling them because they're angry that we're calling them or whatever, obviously we don't want to talk to people if we've annoyed them or angered them or whatever, so we mark them dead at that point. Other than that, I'll follow up with people until the end of time. If somebody keeps putting me off and says, "Oh, call me at this time or that time or whatever," I've had leads that have dragged on for years, and I always reset my 3x3 and 8x8. So if they say, call me in 6 months, I'll call them in 3 months, and with a 3x3 and an 8x8. And then if I get in touch with them on 6 or 7 of 8, and they say, "Call me again in 6 months," I'll keep doing that,
And that's Kelly on the 3x3, and that's you on the 8x8. That just kind of as far as positions being played.
Yeah, that's both of us. That's just our follow-up regime is 3x3 and 8x8, be it a call or a door knock.
That's great. Great information. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that came to mind else for me on that. Just in perpetuity, and I think there's a principle by one of the great, marketing principle people out there, the guy who wrote the book Influence, the Science Behind Persuasion, and one of the key elements of, I think, 6 or 8 of them is commitment and consistency. That's how you build influence with people, and so commitment to doing it and consistently showing up. And it's not like you're putting in a ton of time. It's, a little bit here and a little bit there, and so it doesn't sound like it's a burdensome amount to keep resetting that, because you're, in some ways, building your reputation with that person as someone who follows up and follows through, because eventually something's going to change in their life.
Yeah. Yep.
That's great. Yeah, we're doing great here. We're coming close to the end of the time we've put together. In fact, we've gone over it. But I appreciate you spending the extra time right now to make sure we get through the from the top down to the bottom of things here, and that we really only have 2 more of those FRBO customer types to kind of talk about what they look like and how you handle them. And I'm sure we're going to hear some similar things, but just in a little bit different way. And then finally, as we get to the last part of things, I would like to give those who've been excited by it or intrigued, any one of the two, curious to learn a little bit more about FRBOs, to give them the option to understand where they can go and what they can do, whether it's they do it on their own and what you would recommend on getting FRBO leads to different places, and then what your research and your energy into that compares with our product, and to kind of just give people options and choices of what to look for, how to do it, and give them everything they need to make a decision on whether or not it's something that's right for them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, if we could just jump into that next FRBO customer prospect type, number 2.
Yeah. So the next one is the active investor who wants something that's, better cash flow opportunity maybe, and is going to do a 1031 exchange with the money. And, then you just, at that point, it's, in this market, it's very competitive for buyers. So it's really trying to assure them that you can help them with that. You can find something. You can always make an offer on something contingent on the sale of this property. And especially when you get into multiple units, the market tends to be a little slower and less competitive than it is for single families and condos and townhomes. So, that's usually the discussion I'm having with those people. A lot of times it's also about what would the cash flow situation look like on some of these other properties. So you really have to kind of get into the weeds on some of those things. And some people it's much easier than others. Some people are only maybe cash flowing a couple $100 a month, and if you can show them an opportunity where they can cash flow $800 or $1,000 a month, obviously, that makes a lot of sense to them. And these kind of people are very numbers orientated. This is not typically an emotional sale or an emotional buy. It's just numbers, and it's what works and what doesn't work. So it can actually be kind of, for me, I find a refreshing change of pace from dealing with retail buyers that are, can be kind of emotional sometimes.
Yeah, it's the difference in dealing with, people and professionals, and just kind of like,
right.
You're dealing with the business, like the people who are business minded versus people who are driven by the normal, the normal frailties of human existence.
Yeah, and you really do have to know your stuff when you're talking to these people, because especially if you're newer, you definitely want to educate yourself on things like cap rates and cash flow and ROI, or return on investment, and
where can someone go to learn these things? Because that's immediately just shoots out of my mouth.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great thing to do for continuing education. I know in our state, we have continuing education requirements, so just finding a class through a provider, I think, is the best way to accomplish. I'm sure there's... Would
they look under like commercial or investors, or like what would be like a title that you would Google or search, or class that would appeal to you, that you think would have the knowledge necessary to take advantage of this second class of FRBO prospects?
Yeah, maybe something like language of investors, or working with real estate investors, or something like that would probably be a good thing to Google, or a good heading to look for on class.
Yeah, I bet there are some books out there too that would probably fill people in.
Yeah, plenty of them.
YouTube always seems to work as well. And so
Yeah.
before we move to the third and before we move to the third and final one, could you just kind of maybe do a little maybe like a little, what do we call it, like a little, not role play, but a little like a mock call session, and kind of take us through like what the conversation would sound like when you get one of these people on the phone, and so how you would establish your rapport and how you would ask those questions, and so that way you could insert yourself into, getting into that side of the business.
Yeah. I think with those people, some key questions are how long have you owned the property? And then how long has it been a rental property for you? Because they'll know that you're starting to angle toward that 2 out of the last 5 years, and probably understand that you're trying to suss out if there going to be a capital gains tax consequence or not on the property. And you can even straight out ask them, are you planning on 1030? I mean, if you just flat out ask them, are you going to 1031 the money, or are you cashing out and, planning on potentially having a capital gains tax consequence on this? A statement like that would probably establish a little bit of credibility and rapport that most real estate agents, especially newer ones, aren't really going to think to ask those kind of questions necessarily, because they're just going for the sale and, have their own self-interest in mind. And, one of the things we always hear at Keller Williams, not to toot that horn too much, but it's always coming from a place of contribution for people. If we can get you a fantastic price on the property, that's great for you and for me, but let's dig a little bit deeper. Are you going to have some huge tax consequence that you're not aware of, and maybe holding on to it is a better option as opposed to selling it? And I think people really pick up on that, and you gain people's respect when they see that you're more concerned about their interests than your own.
I mean, that feels like the right thing in any circumstance. When anybody's putting pressure, you can feel if they're coming from their own interests or if they're trying to understand yours and align theirs with yours.
Right. Yeah.
That's a great approach. And so, like before, let's move on to that final class. Help us understand the third kind of main for rent by owner prospect opportunity.
So those ones are the ones who do want to cash out typically, and their kids maybe don't want to take over the rental properties, and they don't have anybody to kind of pass that along to. So again, I think, looking at their self-interest, it's like, well, how many properties do you have? Do you want to actually sell them all at once and have this massive capital gains tax consequence all in one tax year, or is it maybe wiser to spread it out and sell maybe 1 or 2 properties a year and kind of slowly eat that whale, so to speak, of capital gains tax? So that's oftentimes a conversation that we have with people that own multiple properties, which tends to be the case when they're sort of in that end phase of wanting to cash out. Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 that they own, and they just have a real difficulty with, coughing that kind of tax payment up. So it's just a conversation around, do you
even though there's an equitable gain, the tax consequences, just they separate the two, and they just.
Yeah, and what we found a lot is that, if they're going to say, just for round numbers, get $100,000 after they sell the property and all the commissions and closing costs are paid, and they have to pay $30,000 of that in taxes, you're right, they're still going to walk away with $70,000. So that's where we try to steer the conversation. It's like, I understand you're going to have to pay a tax, but it's not like it's coming out of your pocket necessarily. It's coming out of the equity in the property that's been building up. And I always suggest people talk to their accountant to really get a clear understanding of what that consequence is going to be for their particular situation, because ultimately at the end of the day, we don't really know what kind of consequence there's going to be. I mean,
Right.
your accountant's the best one to talk to about that.
Do you ever bring in any sort of outside advisors or support, or like how to? I mean, I guess that might be something to consider, just to help move the process towards a successful resolution for both you guys.
Well, I think it's important to have a good accountant, and I have a great referral source for that. And you know, he moves quickly, and I follow up with him. And you know, I think everybody should have a good accountant, but yeah, I think that's the best person that they can talk to, and it's important that you have somebody if they don't have someone. Obviously, you don't want them going to just some chain tax shop that doesn't know their particular situation. And most of these people have an accountant that they've had a relationship with for, some length of time typically. But again, I think it's just a matter of follow-up. You know, if you say, hey, if they want to know what their tax consequences, obviously we can't really tell them that, but it's following up. Well, I'll call them and talk to my accountant this weekend. We'll follow up with them on Monday or Tuesday. How'd that conversation go with your accountant? How does everything look? And then just continuing that follow-up until, they've had that conversation and make a decision.
I guess that's a little secret that makes a lot of sense. Is it's kind of a roadblock or a bottleneck, and until you get that, your job is constantly to highlight the opportunities, to mitigate the negativities or liabilities, and all the while making sure that either you're following up with them to make sure the situation hasn't changed, or following up with them to make sure that they've acquired the right information so that they can move forward. And people, I think one thing agents are really afraid of is being seen as a pest. And it almost sounds like, that could be someone's mindset in that, but it's almost like you're doing them a service and coming from that place of contribution. And I think that might be the mental shift necessary in order for someone to have that follow-up mindset, feel like it's coming from contribution and not being a pest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for walking through that with us. And I have just one last set of questions here really to go through as we come towards the end of this, which really goes into, again, there are probably a good number of people listening to this right now, and they're saying to themselves, I think this is something I'd like to try, and it sounds like it's a good opportunity to both generate some near-term business, but also really plant the seeds for some longer-term consistent business, which it sounds like, you've done that, and now you're starting to feel those closings come in, and the value of the real long tail, long game come to pass, and that, if you had to, if REDX didn't exist, or at least we didn't offer our for rent by owner lead service, where would you go to get these leads? Where would you look? Where would someone who's, maybe wants to do it on their own at first and kind of try to call these without having to subscribe to our service or get involved on that level?
Mm-hmm.
Where could they go? What would they have to do in order to get those leads?
Well, I mean, I think you could have a title company pull a list of absentee owners if you're looking at a particular area or zip code or something like that. Just, addresses that have off-site tax mailing addresses. That should be a pretty simple thing for any title company to do. And then you'd have to either knock on the door of the tax address, or have some kind of service where you could run through a list and try to get phone numbers matched to, which I know that there's those kind of things out there.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to understand how difficult is that, or how time consuming is that? I mean, what would you say? I mean, would it still be worth it to do if we didn't make it so easy for you just to kind of press a button and get those things? Like how much time would it take to get 30? How much time would it take for you to procure clear, clean, call, confirm, whatever the right words are there to make those for rent by owner leads actionable?
You know, I don't think that I would spend the time doing that, because, you know, I think the rate of return on for rent by owners is about on par with FRBOs and expireds. I think it's about, you know, 5%. So if you're calling 100 or door knocking 100, and it may be even slightly less than that. So, I mean, door knocking on 100 doors to get 4 appointments and then 2, you know, listings. I mean, that's, and who knows how many times you'd have to knock on the door to actually get somebody to answer or be at home. But I don't think I would do that if I didn't just have the service the way that it is right now. I mean, the price that you pay pales in comparison to the return, I think.
Okay. Yeah, some agents have plenty of money to spend on things, and other agents are skeptical and or on a very limited budget. And so I just wanted to present to them the opportunity. If the opportunity was worth pursuing, to doing it on their own. But it sounds like, you know, if this sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like if you see the opportunity in this, it's most really only worth pursuing, given all the other opportunities out there, if you just have it done for you and provided to you.
Yeah, I don't think the time that you'd have to commit if you were knocking on doors wouldn't be worthwhile. I don't think, at least for me. I mean, maybe if you're just getting started and you don't have anything else to do, it might make sense.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for giving us a little bit more insight into that. And I guess I just only have a couple more questions here. Is maybe related back to earlier in our call. I made a note here to kind of catch up with you on this at the end here. Is we talked about committing to a certain amount of pain to enjoy a certain amount of profit. And I guess maybe one thing that I thought would be interesting to revisit here in general, not necessarily about for rent by owners, but overall, just prospecting in general, is there a certain amount of time you think someone who's new to prospecting, even if seasoned agents out here, all of a sudden decide prospecting is what they want to do because it provides a consistent and predictable way to generate business, and but the pain sometimes is, like we said before, above and beyond, you know, what they're initially expecting. And so, how much time would you recommend whether it's a new agent / new prospector or a seasoned agent / new prospector commit to just getting and doing it? For how long? What's that kind of like that commitment to prospecting?
For rent by owners specifically?
No, just in general, I would say. I mean, like you said, the return is about the same on all of them. You know, you're going to get a 5% response / return. And so just overall on a lead stack, no matter how they organize it, you know, commit to prospecting for how long. That way you can break through those initial call reluctance and, you know, not seeing the return on things. Well,
I mean, I think prospecting is an ongoing, never-ending thing, which may be depressing for some people to hear, but that's the facts. I would say before you start to see some initial success for rent by owners or any other lead type, I mean, I think you have to give it a good solid 3 months before you can really expect to see much, because you're going to be nervous, you're not going to say the right things, and it takes a lot of repetition to get comfortable and understand the kind of conversations that you're going to have with people. And, you know, a saying that I've heard and I really take to heart is the people that fail the most are also the people that succeed the most. So, you know, the more times you screw up a conversation with a for rent by owner because you don't know what a 1031 is, or you don't know what cash flow is or cap rates and things like that, you're going to learn pretty quick if you want to be successful.
You're going to learn what you don't know, and you're going to take action to figure that out, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great way to look at it. As opposed to failing, it's really kind of an indoctrination period of time where you just have to figure out what you don't know, and this is your chance to learn it. And the best way to learn it is to get out there and let it come to you, and then you can go seek the knowledge that is.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. You gotta, skin your knee a couple times.
Absolutely. So I've got one last question, and I would say it's a little biased because obviously you're enjoying the fruits of your labor, and you've gone and pushed through this. You've skinned your knees, and now you're seeing how nice for rent by owners are providing for you. And so, what advice would you have for agents who are considering for rent by owners? What advice would you say is necessary for them to feel successful, get successful, or just get started? What would you tell them?
I think it kind of goes back to just being open to trying new things and seeing if it's a good fit for you. I don't think you can make any prejudgments on anything too quickly. Try it for a while, and if it's working out for you after a few months, then keep going. If it's not, maybe you need to change a script or you need to learn more about it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you want to be successful at something, you can't quit. That's definitely a trait that I have. If I decide that I'm going to do something, I'm not going to stop no matter what until it gets done. And I think, just adopting that mindset and having and truly believing it and having that is important. You can't quit, because the only way to win is to not quit and to keep getting up. The people that are successful in this business get told no more than anybody else. And there's there is pain and heartbreak along the way, but, if you're closing a few $1 million a month in volume and, making $30,000-$40,000 a month because you stuck with it for 2 painful years, then, I think that's worth it. So I think you've got to decide, what you want and get it.
I think you just summed up success in general in prospecting. And seriously, I think that is as clearly as you could put it. And it's the mindset, it's the opportunity, it's the ability to see opportunity through the pain, and to stick with it when it hurts. Because at some point in time, everyone else is going to give up, which I'm pretty sure you've seen a number of times. And in the end, you're going to be there on that 5th knock, or that 3rd call, or that 8th knock, and a nice chunk of change is going to come your way because you continued where other people stopped.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we went a little over on our time. I'm pretty sure you're aware of that, but I do appreciate you just continuing to stay engaged and to provide value and to share what you know and to help increase not just my knowledge, because I really enjoy understanding the nuances of what makes someone successful in prospecting, but of course, even more importantly, the REDX prospecting community. And that, I'm sure that down the road, if not also in the near future, you and I are going to get a chance to chat again and pick up on what your next successes are. So I look forward to that. And thank you so much for taking the time to just give us this much value on something that most people, it's obscure and never would have known otherwise.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
So thank you very much, and we'll be talking again soon, and have a good rest of the day.
Okay, thanks so much. You too.